people, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show and Football Inc. We hope you are all happy and healthy, doing the things that you love with those you love to do them with. It's Financials Day, and there's nowhere else you want to be than right here on Financials Day, as Jonny and I, both of us with a little bit of a ra-ta-ta-ta into the financial markets. We're going to be picking through it. Just fair warning, though, I've literally just got back from a day out, and I didn't even know the financials had dropped. Didn't even know. So I've been looking for it on the fly. Fortunately, I'm used to having to disseminate information in real time when the markets drop in my previous life. We've got Jonny here as well, who's also going to go through it with us. Jonny, how you doing, mate? Good to see you, buddy. Good to see you.
Yeah, a little bit worse for wear. I had a lovely wedding last night. Started about 1:45. I left here about 1:45, and I got back about 1:15 last night. Still bouncing around, so I feel a bit fragile. A little bit fragile. The glasses are for the fragile. The glasses are for the sun that's shining
Yeah.
at the moment. I'm hoping
someone can barely open his eyes.
Yeah. But no, listen. Look, I'll read out the headlines for this.
Before you do, just quickly, guys. A couple of things, a couple of admin bits. Smash the like button, guys, on the video. You know this is what we love to do on Spurs Talk Show. Disseminate. Figure out what does it look like, and the numbers are a little bit wild, a little bit interesting, and they're a little bit different to what Deloitte predicted. And Deloitte usually get the numbers spot on, but the devil's in the detail. This one is one to chew through, and I'll be entirely honest, it's going to take more than on the fly to get into it. Yeah. So we might say things today. I'm going to have to chew through it with Jonny, and then after maybe we'll come back and do a second dip into it later.
We're going to do a deep dive.
A deep dive. This is a shallow level, but there's some fascinating insights. I've titled the video "No Europe, No Problem" because it does reek of a narrative that Daniel Levy, this is what he does. This is what the boy does. You might not like him. You might think he's got a horrible repertoire for delivering value on the pitch, but off the pitch, he finds a way to make the numbers be consistent, even in a year where we don't have European football. And we have the fewest games in the history of Tottenham Hotspur's recent past relative to everything else before it. And the year before that we're doing the comparisons, remember, we got to the last 16 of the Champions League. And so these numbers need to be compared with the previous year that have the peak level of Champions League access, the peak level of European football, and all of the juice that comes with it, relative to a year with basically as few games as you could possibly imagine. And so these numbers need to have that context baked in. And going forward, what does that look like? When it's all about that. But before you get into that, guys, smash the like, smash the subscribe on Spurs Talk Show if you're here. But also get down into the description. Just click the link, right click it, copy and paste, whatever you've got to do. Get over to Football Inc. It's mine and Jonny's side gig, but it's really Jonny's access to his own channel. And then the ownership's going to be going in his direction. So if you love Jonny, respect that, reward that by getting over and smashing a like, smashing a subscribe. Football finance is what Jonny and I love to talk about more than even, believe it or not, Bugsy Malone's OnlyFans accounts or even transfer views, news, and clues. I just said that the long way around. I do have one other topic I want to get Jonny's take on, which is a video I did yesterday, which, guys, is all about Ange Postecoglou and the meritocracy that I believe that life should work in. Doesn't always work that way. So we're going to find time in the next hour and 15, if we can, to not only talk about the finances, but also to get a bit of a debate going around what should the reward be, if any, if the guy can manifest some sort of magic and get us back into the Champions League, where can you imagine the numbers that you're about to hit? Can you imagine them amplified by an extra 100 million euros that would come from a decent run in the Champions League next season? It will be incredible to see. Jonny, let's get straight into it, guys. Smash the like, subscribe, and all those things, and we'll get straight into the detail. Jonny, talk me through the headlines.
These are the headline numbers. Okay, so revenue 528 million, which is down 4%. And like you said, Sean, considering 9 less games for a start, I mean that's pretty spectacular. Wages 222 million, down 12%. We know he culled a lot of the wage bill. Wages £42 for every £100 of income, so £4 saved for every £100 of income. The amortization was 136 million, which was up 25%. Underlying loss pre-player sales was up 7%, 59 million. Player sale profits were up 431%. We all know why that was, at 82 million. Pre-tax loss was 29 million, which was down 70%, which is a big drop. Player purchases, 272 million. Gross squad costs, 297 million, 697 million, shall I say. Player sale receivables, 58 million, and player purchases, 441 million, and outstanding borrowings of 872 million pound, of which the vast majority of it is not due to be paid till 2051. So
that's the mortgage on the stadium, right?
Yeah. So we have plenty of time. We have plenty of time on that. Let's have a look at these ones here that you're going through here, Sean, in comparisons.
Yeah. So look, just remember this, right? So the numbers, if you're just looking at the revenue numbers, right? Total revenue for the year decreased. Can you see that clearly on the screen there, Johnny?
Yeah.
So I'm not looking at the screen right now. Yeah. Total revenue for the year has decreased by 4% to 528 million from 549 million the year before. Bearing in mind that in that year before, we got to the last 16 of the Champions League. Now, under the new format of the Champions League, you play the extra 2 games, plus you have obviously the inflation in media money, in campaign finances, all those sorts of things, in the prize money and the sponsorship deals. But Tottenham Hotspur's sponsorship deals won't be affected by that in this particular figures. But you are comparing a year where we got to the last 16, which is a decent campaign-ish, even though you could argue that obviously Conte going in to defend a 1-goal deficit in the second leg and Romero's red card, we could have got through, we could have done better. But ultimately, a 4% decline on a year when we had no football, no European football at all, versus a year when we had Champions League revenue. And that let's just flip back for a second here. 10% of our income in that particular year, or give or take, right? I'm not going to get into the specifics. It's about 11%, whatever. But 10%, total revenue, 549 million in that particular year. 10% of that, give or take, came from UEFA prize money. The following year, I don't know what that 1.3 million comes from. I've got no idea because we didn't actually participate in anything at all.
Money. It's money that was owed from previous seasons. Sometimes it doesn't always come through in one go.
Right. Yeah, there's a delay in the payment.
Leftover payments. Yeah.
So basically zero. But so you're talking about a 10% down on the revenues, right? But if you were to compare that to an Aston Villa, for example, their reports next year, when you look at how little they make compared to us from the commercial, how little they make from us in other sponsorship deals and all those sorts of things, and the stadium and the various hospitality endeavors that we can have, and the things that are happening off the pitch with NFL, none of that stuff happens at Aston Villa. So that 85 million euros, probably now 100 million or more euros that they've made by qualifying into the last 16 or the quarterfinals of the Champions League, that will likely be more likely 30%, 25 to 30% of their comparable revenues from the year before when they actually had European football. So don't just look at the top line here. The way that you need to interpret this is the percentage of the budget, the percentage of the pool. And Tottenham have lost 10% by not qualifying versus what we did just in prize money alone. TV and media money went up. It went up by 17 million, which is about 12%.
It's the deal. It's the Sky deals. That's the home and overseas TV deals for the country.
Correct, but in terms of, and those things were signed in that particular reporting period, so that will be pretty consistent with most other teams as well, probably a 12% rise. But in terms of where the money, the deficit has gone, the other major factor here, obviously, is match receipts, right? £12 million difference from 117.6 to 105.8. 12 million is about, on a difference on a kind of net is about 9%, 10%, whatever. We're just going to call it 10% for argument's sake. So when you have 9 games fewer in a season when Tottenham only played 38 league games and 3 games in the cup competitions, and we only dropped down match receipts by 10%, when you had 20 to 22% fewer games at home that season, 9 fewer into 38, into 40, whatever it is about 25%, 20, maybe a little bit less, 23%. So Daniel Levy maybe it's a little bit, but you have to bake in inflation, right? What's the inflation? Is the cost of doing business going up in the same lines? But either way, when you drop 25% of your mattress, of your actual opportunities to raise revenue, and again, I'm reading this stuff off literally in real time because I've literally
season ticket prices were risen in corporate.
Season ticket prices were risen. They went up as well and of course the reduction in the access to the senior citizens discount, which is minimal in the number, but actually
and the junior discounts, and obviously the fact that the cost of items which we take as minor. When you're selling X amount of chicken burgers or beers, should they only go up 25p a pint or 30p a pint? When you see how many are converted or drunk or consumed over the period, it adds up to a lot of money.
All of these little things, right? Which is why I always say people get really annoyed with the owner and the club's decision making around. For example, if the tax on a pint of beer goes up by 3% by a few, by a penny or two or whatever in the pound, then that should be something that the club should swallow. If you took that approach to everything, you'd be out of business. At every other walk of life, every other business, they pass on the additional cost. Right now, the UK's Chancellor under the Labour government, the lady, I forget her name, she is currently feeling the wrath of British small businesses that are having to pay an extra £1,000 per employee in national insurance contributions from the corporate side, let alone the employment side, the employee side. And so if those sorts of same demands from the fan base were applied to every business, they'd be all out of business immediately. The reason why costs go up, the reason why inflation is what it is in the UK is in no small part not just because of money printing, not just because of an increase in the supply of money throughout the economy, but also because of the demands from the tax office to take those sorts of income, take that money out of the equation. And so, as much as it annoys people, those sorts of things are necessary to pass on because they might seem insignificant here, £2 million here, £3 million there, but all of those things do add up. And Daniel Levy, look, he is in a.
I mean, in fairness, just to balance that, to play devil's advocate, yes, I hear you, but certain things can be swallowed and be consumed to pacify fans. I think it's a balance. You can add certain things which maybe not affect the fans so much on the whole, but bring in extra revenue. But for the fans who got less money. Anyway, look, there's various ways of doing it. But what can clearly be seen from this is that despite having our worst season ever, as far as in the league. And the amount of games we had, sorry, not the league, but how many games we had, 41, the least amount for 16 years. The other thing is, commercial bonuses, the bonuses for qualifying for Champions League failed. So we haven't got that. There will be bonuses for finishing higher in the league position, which again will be a massive drop off this season. It's £3 million a position. And right now, where we're losing a considerable amount of money from where we were expected to finish, say top 6, for being realistic. We're a long way off of that. So if we were to somehow miraculously win the Europa League, next season is looking huge. When you add in the bonuses that will be received from the sponsors for qualifying for such a competition, increased exposure for their brand, the extra 8 or 9 games, and just all across the board, really. The amount that he can charge for a seat, instead of charging £30 for Elfsberg, he can charge £85, £100 for AC Milan or whoever we face. Plus the crazy revenues that are now online for Champions League. We saw the numbers.
Don't forget, we saw the numbers, right, Johnny? Like the highest place, the highest earner at the halfway point at the end of the league stage,
Liverpool.
The highest earner of the Europa League was Manchester United, and they earned less than the lowest placed team in the Champions League. Right? So we had that debate a couple of months ago, I think it was. around whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And listen, I subscribe to your notion that it's nice for the smaller teams in pockets of Europe that don't have that money to be able to find methodologies to compete and to be able to pay. But ultimately, for me, those things create the same imbalance in affordability in their own micro leagues as what you see in the UK. I think that the distribution between the Champions League and the Europa League and the Conference League is out of sync with reality. The fact that one goal difference can be the difference between finishing fourth or fifth or sixth or whatever, and then can ultimately, doesn't matter how well you do in the Europa League, then you're not going to earn as much as a team that does and is from an area of the world that's unlikely to compete in any way, shape, or form at the Europa League level, but because they qualify for the Champions League, they're going to earn more than you and then create their own leagues of differences in their own areas of the world. I think the distribution is wrong, but either way, it is what it is. We're not here to debate that today. Ultimately, what Daniel Levy has carved out here is a narrative whereby, and I think we're going to see some comments from him. I saw a headline saying that Daniel Levy has basically a pot shot back at the criticisms of him. Because ultimately, to me, what is the role of a chairman? I don't think a role of a chairman should be to get involved in picking and choosing the players. I don't necessarily know whether Daniel Levy does that, but for sure he gets involved too much in the nitty gritties of negotiations. I think that and I think most people would agree that he is and would be far better off to be a slave to the idea of revenue generation, and everything else should be handed over. Take your foot off the reins, take your foot off the gas, whatever, hands off the reins, and hand it over to people that have clear delineations of responsibility that say, this is your budget, you figure out how you want to spend it, but these are the frameworks that you operate within. And unfortunately, he doesn't have that trust. But when you come to the areas of the game that he is, and I believe that all chairmen should be responsible for, which is one, making sure that you remember that you are only a short-term, maybe not in his case, custodian of the football club, and that you need to leave the club in a better place than you found it, because you are not the owner. You are a participant. You might be the owner technically, but you are just a participatory element of the story of the football club that will hopefully live on long after you've gone. But ultimately, do what you need to do, which is provide the resources, use your nous, use your business acumen to provide the resources for other people that are better suited to identify the talent. And the one area that Tottenham, and we can agree on this, Johnny, I believe I'll hand over to you here before we move down the list further. The one area that we can all agree on is that whilst we're fantastic at generating revenues from the fans, but also the one thing that we do that no other club does is diversify the responsibility of the revenue generation of this football club away from just Tottenham fans specifically. We look to NFL fans, we look to rugby fans, we look to Beyonce fans and whoever else fans. We'll come to that stuff in a minute. But generally speaking, Johnny, this is another representation of what he does brilliantly, which is despite the volatility in our success on the pitch, he has a way to reduce the burden and to nullify the impact of football side volatility for the club itself to be able to maintain, generally speaking, a sustainable and incredible acumen at delivering wildly strong results, regardless of what happens on the pitch.
Listen, for me, he would get more credit if he had the same acumen to appoint someone to do the football, stay out of the football, stay in your lane, do what you know best, and employ others to do what they know best. Unfortunately, over many, many years, he hasn't done that. You know, there's countless stories about him getting involved in deals, losing deals, whether it be naming right deals, player deals, and all the rest of it. And unfortunately, you know, that's where he's fallen apart with the quality of events that we're having. Are superb. The quality of a lot of things that are going on off field, terrific. But deep down, the heart and soul, all fans care about is on a Saturday or a Sunday or during the week when they go to see their games and see their team play, that they want their team to be winning or competing at the highest level. Right now, we're not doing that. We're not competing at the highest level. We're not winning games. And right now, that's all the fan base can focus on. So whilst it's admirable that, you know, we are sustaining ourselves off the pitch while we're having a mare on it, it doesn't it's not.
I know it doesn't translate. I hear you.
It's not sexy to the vast majority of fans who are only interested in the football. If you're into the football finance and thing, and you can see the bigger picture, that yes, should we get to a stage where we have a manager that's capable of getting us to Champions League football, that this could be a behemoth, right? If we had European football, we would be a behemoth. We would absolutely be a behemoth. 30 events. These numbers here are when we had hardly any events.
100%. Massively important fact, massively important thing. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah,
it's so important to remember that these numbers will get stronger again next year. Stronger again because of European football, even though it's going to be nowhere near comparable to Arsenal, Liverpool, or Villa. But the 30 events, there was 17, or it was 34, I think now 30, whatever. It was 15 before. The amount, I mean, listen, I'm not going to be able to do this right now because I haven't had a chance. When I crunch through the detail, mate, it's going to be insane.
Can I just say that I think the number that's concerning most people is the cost per income. Player cost per income is down £4. It's from £46 per 100 on player wages down to £42. Drop of £4, which is I think 12%. Is it 12%? Yeah, I think it's 12%, something like that.
What's the number? Sorry.
I think it's 12%. Let me just look. Sorry, I want to make sure that I'm quoting the right number here.
This is obviously down to the rev. This is down to the.
I'm talking about
the wage ratios, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about. Okay, so let's see. Yes, so wages for every £100 worth of income, we were spending £46. Sorry, £46, and we are now spending £42. So,
right, so it's down from 46% to 40. Yeah, so it's 42% wage to revenue ratio.
Yeah,
right?
42%.
Which we knew that. We knew that anyway. That's not new
but it's you need that confirmed, don't you? I mean,
you do. But at the same time, like I said before, that isn't including Tanguy and Ndombele, right? And Tanguy and Ndombele would have been and I'm guessing I haven't got I'll look into this is all brand new information to me, but that will be allocated on the abnormal expenses, the one-off expenses, right? £10 million that was paid off, which is often overlooked. And obviously, look, you're losing the Harry Kane money. You lose for the wages. You're also losing the Hugo Lloris wages, the Eric Dyer wages, the Perisic wages. All of those things come into it. But what's also meaningful here is that is a ratio number that is affected by the revenue number as well, right? So I know revenue has gone down by 4%, but it hasn't gone down by as much as the drop off in relative competitions and the relative access to revenues that should have been there. So if you're dropping your revenue number only by 4%, but you're dropping your wages number by a lower number, then that's obviously going to manifest into the number that you see, a 4% drop off in the wage to revenue turnover ratio. But that is affected by, that wouldn't look as bad as it did if everything else was lower in the same proportions.
I get you, but my argument is I would like to see a 55 to 60% ratio, right? To income, to wages, allowing us to acquire a better quality. Listen, all said and done, top players come for one thing: wages, not transfer fees, wages, right? That's what attracts them. And that's, had we spent that and been a little bit braver, 55 to 60% is not a massive number, Sean. We know that.
Hang on. Again, there's context there, mate. If you have 60% and you're participating in Europe, which we've taken a year out of Europe for this particular reporting period.
Europe, though, you have to sometimes speculate.
Well, we haven't had to for 15 out of the last 17 seasons, right? So this argument that Tottenham never spend the wages and that's why we don't get in Europe is nonsense because we
weren't at 40. But what was the percentage for £100?
Again, context is key. The reason why if the revenue number goes up, which it has done for the last 4 out of the last 5 years, or in this scenario, it's dropped, but not by the meaningful amount of everything else because of the off-the-field activity. As revenue goes up, if wages stay the same, then the wage to revenue number goes down, right? So you have to bake in the context. Just quickly. If you wanted the 60% that you're referring to,
I said 55 to 60, yeah.
Okay, but just for argument's sake, round number, 60%. Then if you are qualified in Europe, you have to limit yourself to 70% max spend that includes the other two factors of transfer spend that's amortized. And again, amortization, yes, it's like you factor over 5 years, but when you're also factoring in the previous 4 years of amortization as well for a 5-year contract, it's just easier for the purposes of making it simple to say, forget about amortization and let's just look at the amount of money that you're spending, right? Because if you're spending £100 million every year, then it doesn't matter because it's all amortized the same amount. And we have spent a similar amount over the last 5 years. My point is that if you get to 60% wages to ratio, then you only have 10% wiggle room left. You only have 10% before you breach the threshold of UEFA competition legalities. And that has to include the combination of agents fees, of which I've done the report on before, is about £25 million a year. And on top of that, you only have then whatever's left after that to go after the transfer spend. And if you're limited to 70% and your revenues are about 500 million, if your wage ratio is 60%, that leaves you with about £30 million spend. And so, Johnny, my point is
there's enough wiggle room.
It's not enough wiggle room. It isn't, because if you raise the revenues to 60%, in order to get those people in, you also have to pay their transfer fees. And those transfer fees are going to be more than the 10% threshold. Now, John, you're listening. You're not the 10% that you're left with before you breach the UEFA threshold on a £500 million revenue is £50 million. So if you want to have £100 million spend on a £500 million revenue stream, you need to leave yourself at least 20% wiggle room in that regard, unless you have the other things tied up, which we don't have, which is a nice little cozy thing with a nice cozy relationship with Saudi Arabia that can buy a player that you bought for 5 million for 50. Do what Newcastle, Villa and Chelsea did that year when we spoke about this before it happened, and it happened 2 minutes later. Or you have the youth policy, which we're just starting to see the merits of, but haven't in the past. So whilst I acknowledge that yes, you could raise the revenue, raise the wage to revenue turnover ratio, you can't do that absent the other factors that we don't have or haven't had, but we are going to have hopefully going forward. So it's not as simple as people just saying 46% is not enough, 42% is even worse is a fucking joke. That's just not how it works.
Look, Sean, to say we can't do it is also wrong, right? We can increase our wages because we've had the wages higher before, and we've managed to do it. So
that was in a world where there wasn't a 70% threshold, mate. Like again,
I'm not asking for a 70%.
It's so important that we're clear on this fact, Johnny. It's so important that we divorce the emotions from the argument.
Sean, we've dropped 4%, right? Okay, so are we agreed that we could at least go back up that 4% next summer and utilize that 4%? At least,
Johnny, again, mate. Again, like you're pitching from an emotional thing.
No, I'm not pitching from an emotional.
You are. Either then, with all due respect, I know you understand this because we speak about it all the time. I know that you understand this, but people that don't need to hear this clearly, right? You have if you qualify for Europe, you can only work with a 70% net spend ratio. That's the rules. We're at 46%. The reason why it's dropped to 42%, the reason why it's dropped to 42% is not just because we've taken the wages down. It's also because the revenue is not falling in the same line as everything else. The same in a year when your revenue jumped up 100 million quid, your wage to ratio is going to drop as well, even if you keep your wages the same. So there's that factor that people don't look into. The other factor is if you go to 55%, that only leaves you with 15% for the rest. And that has to include your amortized transfer spend and your agents fees.
So how are other clubs with fraction? Yeah, but what about the ones that aren't in Europe? They're not all doing that.
The likes of Brighton front-loaded their sales of Caicedo and et al. and Cucurella and all that stuff. The likes of Aston Villa are at 97%. How they're going to get that round that?
Sell an asset, right? Which we have assets that could well sell. For example,
right?
Guti Romero, right?
100%.
I understand in an ideal world where you've got this and this, right, and nothing's being able to be shifted. I agree, but I still think that speculate to accumulate, right? that there is more of a wriggle room. I understand we got greater incomes coming in, right, which deflects that 42%. It's not all a deduction, but we know that there has been a massive reduction in the wages from Harry Kane, Perisic, Lloris, Dyer, and so on and so forth. And the players that have been bought in on a much lesser salary, right? So we know that, you know, for example, if we were to somehow get Jonathan David to the club, he's not going to come in on a £60 million transfer,
and you're not getting him for free either on the amortization, right?
Right, but what you will be doing is you'll be paying him 250 grand a week, probably,
and the agent fee will be 20 million quid. Right, they will get distributed towards his family or to him in a abnormal whatever. Right, all that stuff is not going to be measured on the traditional wage to turnover.
My point is, it will allow us to do a deal like that. Right,
100%. I'm not sitting here saying that there's no wiggle room. I'm just sitting here saying that those people that look at that number and say it was a disgrace at 46, and it's even more. It's shameful at 42. They either don't know how it works, and that's why we need to clarify that, or they do know, and they're just like pushing agendas, because in reality, you can move to 50% and have a lot of wiggle room. And by the way, £75 million, which is about the 8% difference to go from 42 to 50, that's a lot of money when it comes to wages over a year. So yes, there is a lot of wiggle room, and I've said 1,000 times. Yeah. 1,000 times, I do expect this summer for Tottenham to massively increase the wages, to have a club's highest earner, whether that's from a new signing or from a Romero or whoever getting a new deal, or Van der Ven, whatever, or in fact, and both a new club's record transfer. So I acknowledge and 100% expect and demand that Daniel Levy has got himself into a fantastic position where he's nullified the impact, right? He has done brilliantly, and we're going to carry on going through this in a second. But the notion that 42% is just a blanket black bold statement in the results, you need to look into, people need to understand what that really means relative, and how those numbers, how that percentage gets, how it becomes what it is. And it's more than just one thing.
I'll ask you the question. Would it be fair enough to say that the behemoth that will be the club, with 30 events, external events, everything that's gone on, and Champions League football, that the supporters of this club should expect, where we are now with our financial wiggle room, where the debt's down to 2051 at 2.79%, like I've said, for the vast majority of that debt, many times before it sort of came out, that we would be in a position where we should be spending money, should we be in the Champions League, and have that wiggle room.
If we get in the champion, if we
there can be no excuses. I'm saying,
yeah. If we somehow manage to win the Europa League, then obviously the prize money for the rest of the Europa League campaign, it jumps up significantly, which is wonderful. Then you get the buffer of the 50 million essentially guaranteed from various sources for the Champions League entry. Plus you get the commercial, which we haven't even gone into yet, which we'll do in a second, and the off-field stuff. Plus you get the additional 15 events. Plus you probably make yourself
double match day,
right? And another 8 games.
Yeah.
If Tottenham were to win the Europa League this year, then there would be absolutely no excuse to see a record transfer budget, in my opinion. Right, and who that goes to, I guess that becomes complex around what happens with Daniel Levy and Ange Postecoglou, and that is a section of this show that we have to pop into before the end. I know you've only got an extra 45 minutes, mate, before you got to go. So, look, guys, we are going to go through this. I'm going to spend all night long looking through this, going through it. So I'm reading this for the first time, but in a nutshell, Johnny, what we've seen so far, I think that the first takeaway is Daniel Levy has cemented himself as the best business brain in the Premier League to do things organically without putting his hand in his pocket. Are people okay with that? Do people care about that? Probably not. Right? All they care about is on the field success, and I get it. But the other takeaway is that we need people who do care about this stuff and don't just want to push narratives. You need to understand that 42% ratio thing is not necessarily always how it looks. I'm not saying it's not There's not like no smoke without fire, whatever. It is obviously as a consequence of getting rid of those players, but it's also a consequence of the top line. Both things come into play when you're figuring out a percentage.
I agree. I understand.
I know you understand this, John. I know I'm talking to people that maybe don't. And the other factor is that obviously, we are very much short of leaders on the pitch. We've gone down a youth transfer policy that we're starting to see the best of. But on top of that, the other clubs that manage to figure it out, you asked the question, how is it that certain clubs can do it and Tottenham don't? Well, look, when it comes to Aston Villa, they are, in my opinion, if the rules are worth anything, if they are, and it's obviously questionable whether they are or not, they need to figure out something. They need to figure out that they can't continue to be operating in Europe and still have that threshold. But you know what? The fact that they've done as well as they have this year, that threshold's going to come down. Not necessarily because their wages are coming down, but because their revenue is going up. Point in case, right? That's an example of what I'm talking about.
Where do we
if
sit?
Your revenue goes up, your ratio comes down anyway.
Can someone tell me now, because I off the top of my head, is it true that Tottenham have one of the lowest percentage ratios of wages to earnings in the whole of Europe, top teams? If someone could give me those numbers, I did have it somewhere. I couldn't quite find it. But
yeah, we will do. For sure we will do. But again, that is in no small part because we have a higher revenue number than most teams in Europe, right? So again, two things. There's a numerator and a denominator. Two things make the percentage, right?
There's facts on both. Listen, there's facts on both sides which are indisputable. One, revenues have risen, right, which would swing that down on its own, coupled with the fact that we've had a massive drop in wages, getting rid of the Kanes, Llorises, and the Perisic's and the Dyers and so on, and the Celsos and what have you. So, yeah. I agree. Let's move on. Let's have a look down now. We're
going to go into a second. Just got a super chat from Blaine. Big up, Blaine. Good to see you, mate. 4 things are certain in life: death, taxes, Sean Butler late to his own stream, and Daniel Levy publishing. He has to operate within the sustainable limits of the club. Big up, lads. We haven't even got to Daniel Levy's commentary. I haven't even read Daniel Levy's commentary. I've seen a couple of people in the comments saying, I think Brian Daigle was saying it's a disgrace. We'll find out when we get to it. But thank you very much, Blaine. Good to see you, buddy.
3.4 million he's earned this season. He hasn't awarded himself a bonus yet.
Has he not? Okay, that's interesting.
I haven't seen a bonus.
We'll find out. Guys, there's 400 people in the house, which is insane for a show that was literally put together 3 minutes before we went live. Please smash the like button and the subscribe if you enjoyed the debate and also the insights. And get over to Football Inc. as well, which is our channel, but it's Johnny's way of essentially being rewarded for his hard graft around the community. So the link is in the description there. All right, let's get back to the thing. And thank you, Blaine. Really appreciate you, mate. You're always a legend. Always a legend. Forgive me, but I'm just going to take away the comments for a second, guys. I won't be looking at the comments for 2 seconds. I'm looking back on the screen here. So TV media revenues were 165. Driven by the Premier League broadcast deal and a higher finishing position of 5th. Johnny, how much did you say each position was worth? 3 million quid, was it?
You said, £3 million. So right now we're losing a considerable amount of money, around about 20 odd million, I think.
Okay, so that's going to go against us in next year's numbers. Commercial revenues and other income from sponsorship, merchandising, and other income such as third-party events, which remember, guys, doesn't include the double bubble, the doubling of those events. Visitor attractions, pre-season tour and conference and events increased to 255 from 275. So essentially, give or take 25 million quid, which give or take is 10%. So commercial revenues up 10% in a year when we don't have any of the other things. And also we don't have the commercial sponsorship deals that are going to pay out those incremental benefits of being in Europe. So imagine if we had been in the Europa League last season, then that number will probably be at 270, 275. Imagine if we'd been in the Champions League, it'd be over 300. I mean, insane numbers. And look, as a business guy, I'm just going to sit here and say it's just phenomenally impressive. As a Tottenham fan, I get it. I understand why people are upset. But look, that's why I'm going to hold his feet to the fire. And if you are watching, Daniel, and I know people at Tottenham do watch this show, then look, I've had your back for a long time, buddy. In a community where no one does, I've had your back for a long time. Don't embarrass me, mate, this summer. Do your bit, Daniel, and whoever else is watching. Pass the message on. Operating expenses decreased by 7% to 453 from 487, principally due to fewer football matches and third-party events. So essentially, that's just the cost of doing business, right? The cost of doing business. If you have less to do, you've got less costs associated. What's interesting is that decreased by 7%, whilst the sponsorship, the commercial deals were up 10%, and also the match day receipts was only down by 10% or 8%, whatever it was. We said 11% versus the 25% drop in actual fees. So what's worth noting is that despite it decreasing 7%, the fact that we had 25% less, give or take 25%, 22% less home events, if your operating expenses have dropped by 7%, then on a per match basis, Johnny, the cost of doing business has gone up significantly.
Correct.
Which is important to note, right? And
at that period, we were looking at food inflation,
massive wild inflation,
Ukraine war, fuel, energy prices, raw materials, blah blah blah, food. And the thing is, if a lot of the deals here are done on contracts, so you would be pitching a contract over 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. So a lot of these contracts, they would be out of pocket there. So be going back to the club, probably trying to get them renegotiated. But yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me. Daniel Levy's pretty good at tertiary negotiations, right? Look at the Ineos situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's meaningful to know that, right? So despite only a 4% drop in revenues, into an environment where the cost of doing the business, the cost of putting on the events has clearly gone up. Again, haven't had a chance to look through the detail. I'll do that tonight and we'll come back to you guys tomorrow. If you're interested, let me know. But essentially, if the costs of the operating expenses have only decreased by 7% when we're doing essentially 22% fewer games, then you're looking at almost a threefold reduction on a percentage basis, a penny in the pound basis, 3 times more expensive to do business. I'm not saying it's literally 3 times more expensive, but the margin erosion is 3 times higher because of those ratios. So cost of doing business, as Johnny said, into a world of inflation, meaningful. And again, another pat on the back to be able to keep your revenues fairly steady into that environment. It's a tricky environment. Again, even for big businesses like Tottenham Hotspur, for small businesses like I run, cost of doing business is crippling. I was in Guildford today, about half an hour away from where I am, buying a new Gibson guitar. And I haven't been there for a few years, but the last time I was there, it was a thriving community. Today I went through there. So many of the showrooms, the furniture showrooms, the blinds, all shut up, closed down. It's a bellwether for where the economy is. Buckle in, guys, because I think there's a bad recession coming. The loss of the financial year after depreciation, amortization. Oh, sorry, I've skipped one. Profit and operations before depreciation, amortization, player trading, interest, and taxation increased by 4%. So we'll find out why in a second.
Yeah, we'll find that out.
Yeah. So
the one that interests me, to be honest with you, is the one that I've been talking about, for about 2 years now, is one of Daniel Levy's biggest plays with this debt. Was restructuring this debt with Bank of America before the interest rate rise occurred, doing a 25-year deal at 2.79%. I think it was. I believed at the time. I believed it was £670 million, which I wasn't sure the exact.
$1 billion, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 6. Well, no, but it wasn't all the debt. That was, and it says here that 90% has been restructured. I said it was 670 million. It's 672. Over 90% of financial borrowings of 851 are at the fixed rate, with an average interest rate of 2.79%, which is what I mentioned to people a couple of years ago, which was a masterstroke. Because
it really was a masterstroke.
Because right now there are many clubs in Europe who have borrowed money, who didn't put it on a fixed rate, who didn't renegotiate large sum debt, and are struggling to make payments. Not just clubs.
I mean, the interest rates jumped from 0.5% to, and this is the base rate, rate of which you add, depending on the size, the risk, all those things, and the structure, and what you want to do. And the risk associated,
5%, wasn't it? 5 and a bit percent.
Well, that's what the base rate was, right? Yeah. So if you're going as a business that's not like the Bank of England or anything like that, like JP Morgan or whatever, that wants to borrow money.
You're playing probably about 1% over base if you're lucky.
A lot more than that in some circumstances, depending on the size of the company, right, and what you're trying to do. So if you were a Tottenham Hotspur, or if you were an Everton, or if you were someone like Newcastle United, for example, who are, I don't know whether Newcastle's owners, last I read about them, they weren't going to fund the new stadium, which is going to cost $1.3 billion, $1.4 billion. And as far as I read last time I checked, and I could be wrong, but last time I checked, that the owners weren't going to finance that, and that was going to have to come out of just traditional corporate debt. So even though the markets are dropping now, right, because of where the economy is, and they're worried about the risk of recession, etc. So they're dropping the interest rates again. Inflation isn't what it was, and inflation came down ahead of expectations last week in the recent report. So on that basis, they're probably going to lower the numbers again, which is good for you, and it might be good for someone who wants to borrow money. But if you had have wanted to do that deal 6 months ago, a year ago, then Tottenham's cost of debt, just the cost, not the repayments, the cost of debt, would have been around £60 million a year just to pay off the nominal,
probably
right?
double,
not to pay off the more than double, much more than double.
And that's why I'm saying, and not only that, it was a 25-year deal payable. I think it's 2051. I think the deal was for. But my point is it's given us like 18 years to structure that debt and pay off and give us plenty of headroom that it shouldn't affect our transfer strategy. Right. Had he not done that, I think the plan now is to probably try to pay off the vast majority of the debt, which is outside that 2.79%, because that will be a much higher interest rate, a flexible interest rate, and that will be what's holding the club back. The quicker you can pay off that proportion of the debt, the better for the club, more wiggle room. I mean, I look at these accounts, right? I got to be honest.
Just quickly, Johnny, just whilst we're talking about, before you move on to your last point, just quickly on that. That's the reason it's not been articulated by Daniel Levy, but that's the reason why the Qatari news is so relevant right now, because Daniel Levy knows that this paragraph here, is the one thing that the financial minds are looking at and saying, from a business perspective, that's where he hangs his hat, right? And a lot of it comes down to timing. I said this on the video yesterday. Half of life is timing, half of it's luck. And a lot of that comes down to, was he a genius doing it? For sure. But
both.
A lot of it was like the timing, right? Like we didn't know what we didn't know. He didn't know that there was going to be the Ukraine war and all this shit that was going to affect.
He didn't know that. He didn't know that, but he took advantage of the wins, in his favor to restructure that debt with the Bank of America.
Correct.
And, a debt which they know is going to be 2.79%. Your debt levels, exactly where you are, where you'll be operating, growth numbers over the next 5 years. Forget 2051. Can you imagine the income by that time? Who knows what will happen? World War III might kick off before by then.
But the point I was trying to make was that the reason why he doesn't want to go to the debt markets for the however much he needs for the hotel, is because if he was to organize that debt now that hasn't been baked into this, he'd be organizing that debt at the similar sort of levels, right? If you were borrowing £100 million, if you're borrowing it over 25 years, you're going to get the lowest rate. If you're borrowing it over 10 years, you're going to have to pay more because the banks don't make that residual income, and that's what they're in the business for in the first place. And so, all of a sudden, this particular paragraph that I've highlighted, well, in the next year's results and the years following, all of that stuff also has to incorporate the debt that would be attributed to the hotel and the training ground and all those things, which he doesn't want to do, because it will dilute the value of Daniel Levy. And so that is why I don't believe that he is looking for investment from Qatar because he wants out, or that the fan pressure is too much, or any of these things that Levy out people would like to attribute their value to. It's because you can hide that debt as part of the takeover purchase price, right? But
also, Sean, the hotel and White Webs projects and develop are capital intensive projects, which he doesn't have the capital for. So that's
what I'm saying. Right? He has to get it from somewhere. He's only going to get it from.
But it says clearly later on down there that these investments are separate I think you can see, maybe scroll down, I think it might be further down, are separate off the pitch. There we go. There we go. We retained our status as the Premier League's greenest club. Aren't you proud?
Not interested in that.
The club construction spend on the planned hotel next to the stadium in the financial period was circa 3 million so far. The hotel will need to be part of a significantly larger development with other external shareholders, right? Which we don't know as yet. This is a long-term project which would be non-recourse to the club and be part of the redevelopment of High Road West, as well as the other sites. Now, the other sites are all of the housing on the opposite side, on Chicking and all the rest of it. Now, who will benefit from that? Will the club? I don't believe so. I believe that these benefits will be borne by ENIC. The profits of this thing will be borne by ENIC themselves rather than the Tottenham Football Club. We shall see.
It was promised to us that all of this stuff will eventually come back in. It's interesting that Tottenham Hotspur have 17 other businesses that are not recognised on here. We shall see. I'm sure there'll be a bait and switch at some point. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Daniel Levy or Joe Lewis or anyone else is, not prepared or not willing to fudge the numbers or to hide certain things. Like we don't see the other 16 of the 17 accounts, right? We don't see those things because they're apparently not relevant to us.
They're ready for this. They are ready. All of these little ring-fenced companies, right, are designed to slot in to developments that are going to happen in the future, whether it's the White Webs building the women's stadium there, the NFL training or what have you, the hotel and all the spin-offs that will produce.
So that money, for me, whilst it might not necessarily be on the accounts, that's the reason. Like Daniel Levy doesn't want to pay 8-9% loans, whether it's on the Tottenham accounts or somewhere else on one of the other 16s. He doesn't want to do that, right? Which is why he's looking for investors. Money. It's not because exactly right, and so that's why we don't know what's going on. That's why there is non-disclosure agreements with Amanda Staveley or whoever else. That's why the story around the Qatari, the QSI going into Malaga FC and Liverpool also looking at Malaga FC. That's why me and you share our frustration with Tottenham Hotspur being the groundbreakers on multi-club ownership 30 years ago, and then letting that sort of whole thing
fall apart,
drift away, and everybody else feeling a march on it. That's why those things are very frustrating. But that's why, for me, I do believe that all of those things can coincide and correlate to a world where there is going to be some sort of announcement, whether or not that is directly involved to the Tottenham stuff initially or otherwise. I'm not sure, but the money for those things has to come from somewhere. And knowing Daniel Levy as we do, can you imagine him paying peak interest rates for a loan for things that he wants out of at some point in the future? I don't believe so. And so what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If they have already committed to the hotel, if they have already committed to the training ground redevelopment, the medical center, the ladies training ground, the NFL pitch, all that stuff has to be financed somewhere. And if it's not going to be financed by long-term debt at peak valuations, it will be financed by an investor, whether it looks and smells. If it looks and smells like a shit, it's usually a shit,
I expect, look, when people look at the Newcastle takeover, they focus on the Saudi PFI fund, right? The Saudi fund. But if you look a little bit further down that fund, you'll see the Rubin brothers. Okay. Yeah. The Rubin brothers are the biggest property developers in Britain. And what better way to win the hearts and minds of the people of Newcastle, like they have done today? They've delivered, a trophy the first time in 70 years, the feel-good factors back in the north. When they go, the Rubin brothers, and they go and they say to the council, we want to develop X, Y, and Z, how much easier do you think it's going to be to win the hearts and minds of those councillors and get these projects done? So they will build it, the Saudis will fund it, and they will share the revenue streams. And that's probably what will happen somewhere along the line with this. Well, there'll be maybe the main partner will be someone like the Qataris, and a smaller percentage part of that could well be a property developer or a developing company that will share and do their part of the build, whether it be the hotel, the training medical complex, and the women's stadium. But there'll be a minority shareholder, but sharing the spoils moving forward. I can see that happening. Safe chicking, but the whole of that left-hand side, they want to make it like Wembley Way from the station currently. So knock down, green in the middle, and houses and apartments on either side. Now, that was meant to have started in 2023. We're now in 2025, and that's not happened because obviously the flats, the market for flats is flat, no pun intended, and there probably isn't the appetite.
I don't know if you've walked around.
No appetite for it at the moment.
I'm not sure if. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah. I'm not sure if you've. If it's the same where you are. Where I live, I've never seen as many for sale signs pop up in the last sort of 90 days. And like I say, walking around Guildford today, I was like, what's happening here? This is scary. Businesses shut down, big, long-term, family-run, established businesses boarded up, gone out of business. Flats houses everywhere, apartments just like for sale. Going to get deals with the government to fill up with people that are going to get moved out of hotels. It's a weird economy, mate, and I really don't like the look of it from a like talking to the audience perspective. Buckle in, guys. Don't have. I say that having just bought a really expensive guitar, but like that was something I've been saving up for a long time.
You can sing yourself out of misery, can't you?
I'm going to start doing Tottenham content, singing songs about Daniel Levy. Oh, he's a great businessman. But but yeah, guys, just there's bad times coming. Bad times coming. Let's finish up this. I want to get to the Daniel Levy statement.
Yeah.
And then I want to ask you about the pitch that I was talking to you about with regards the Ange Postecoglou kind of meritocracy based thing. Let's look at what he says here. As we announce our financial year for the 30th of June 2024 year, we currently find ourselves 14th position in the Premier League, navigating what has been a highly challenging season on the pitch. We are, however, in the quarterfinals of the UEFA Europa League. Winning this competition would see welcome silverware and mean qualification for the Champions League. We must do everything we can to support the team in these key final stages. Since opening our new stadium in 2019, we have invested over £700 million net in player acquisitions. Recruitment remains a key focus, and we must ensure that we make smart purchases within our financial means. I often read calls for us to spend more, given that we are ranked as the 9th richest club in the world. However, a closer examination of today's financial figures reveals that such spending must be sustainable in the long term and within our operating revenues. Our capacity to generate revenue that is recurring determines our spending power. We cannot spend what we do not have, and we will not compromise the financial stability of the club. Indeed, our off-pitch revenues have significantly supplemented the lower football revenues this year, testament to our diversified income strategy. Sorry, I've lost. I'm hiding that behind the comment there. I want to thank everyone who supports us through our good and bad times. We are resilient and passionate about our club. We shall aim to finish this season as strongly as we can and continue to build for success on the pitch. Do you know what? Like, all right, a bit of a nothing burger of a statement. He's having a little punch back saying, you think we can spend whatever you want. We can't. And listen, to be entirely honest, mate, as a business guy, as someone who understands, I haven't looked through the detail. The devil is always there. If there's, me, I'm as honest as I can be in life. But when it comes to this stuff, I'll call it out as I see it. When I go through the devil, when I go through the details tomorrow, if there's some like, howitzers of insight that I think is relevant, I'll bring it to your attention, good or bad. Right? I'm not. People think that I'll defend Daniel Levy. I do not. I call him out all the time for the things that I think should be called out. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it's nighttime at 2:00 in the afternoon because other people want you to. I'm not that. It's not how I work. I don't care if people don't like it. I don't care if people have made up their minds. If Daniel Levy is doing a good job, I'm going to say it in what I believe his remit is. And if he fucks up, I will say it. And I will look for the devil, but in the detail. But in the numbers that he's just presented, Johnny, and in that statement, I think what he is saying is something similar to what I am saying, which is like, you might not understand how it works. And if you don't, that's fine. I will bring it. He's not going to sit here and come out and do a YouTube channel. I will try my best to educate you if you are interested on the things that I believe that I understand sort of on certain levels more than many. And Johnny, I know you do too, mate. Together we can have debates about the intricacies of it.
He didn't say we got our Tottenham back.
He didn't say that, mate. No, he didn't. But look, listen, my takeaway point is, I know people are sitting there going, well, nothing else matters anymore, bar the Europa League final for this season. But actually, if it's £3 million a place, right, and you can probably get to 10th if you go on a run, then actually the league does matter, because that is an extra 12 million quid in the coffers, right? That isn't irrelevant, and we shouldn't just sit there and say, fuck the league, let's all focus on Thursday night.
No, I mean, listen, you understand, right? It's theoretical. No one really cares about the league now, because the only thing that can save our season is Europa League, which is perfect time to pivot to the question, Sean. Should Ange Postecoglou, if he was to win the Europa League, be given another season in the job?
Yeah, that's my question to you, mate.
Personally, it's a no, because forget about my feelings about him. I worry about a Ten Hag situation here, whereby, Ten Hag had a very poor season, went on, lifted the FA Cup, and they entrusted with him another big spend. And they spent a lot of money on the players that he requested to back him. And then come October, it was pretty obvious to all that could see, again, it wasn't going to work. So for me, it doesn't matter if he wins the Europa League. He has shown over 18 months or more, 2 seasons, that he is not equipped to do this job. And I do not care. If it was up to me, I would have got rid of him in this window and given us 18 days to get in an interim manager like a Redknapp or someone like that to come and work with the teams. Anyone.
I think Graham Potter, if you wanted to sack him, it had to be in January. And I
thought he'd be gone by Christmas.
I said what I said. I said I don't think you can sack a guy that's still in all the competitions that you had any chance of winning. And until that played out, and then we lost obviously two cups. So obviously, it is what it is, right? I'm happy to sit there and say, benefit of hindsight, maybe go in a different direction. But for what it's worth, I think the biggest elephant in the room. Look, we spoke about it. It's meaningful in the numbers. It's meaningful in our strategy, and it's meaningful in our future. And that is getting the best out of these young crew. And I think we can both agree. We've spoken about this ad nauseum, Johnny, over the last fucking year, that the shining lights of this season have been our young players, and they wouldn't have had the chances that they've had if it hadn't been for the injuries that we've had, right? So, and do I have any faith in Ange Postecoglou? Do I share and sympathise with everyone that sits there, people in the comments? By the way, just smash the ones. We'll do a quick ones and zeros game, right? But I'll ask you to do it now, and then once we've chewed over, just in the next 10 minutes, once we've gone through our various arguments, then I'll ask you to put in a ones and zeros change, right? So 1 for Ange deserves a reprieve, and if we win the Europa League, only if we don't, then I think we can all agree he needs to go.
Can I read my stats first, Sean? Let me just read this first, right? Before you do the vote, okay? Okay, so
I want the vote before we have the argument.
No, not the argument. I'm just reading some facts before the vote.
No, but I want people to give. I'm going to ask them twice, so I want them to say their gut instinct.
Fair enough.
So gut instinct right now, 0 for sack him now or sack him regardless. 1 for if he wins, you keep him. And I want to see what the general trajectory is. If we win, not regardless, but if we win, does he get a stay? If we win and if we win regardless, then he still has to go. That's the 1 and 0. 1, you let him stay. 0, you don't. Let us know. And then Johnny's going to put together the argument as to why he should go anyway. And I'll put together the argument of why, if we win, he should probably be given a chance. Go on, Johnny.
Right. Are they voting there?
They're voting. Yeah, they're voting. They're voting.
I'll just murmur.
Zeros, 1 to stay, 1 to stay, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1 from Callum. I'm saying at the moment it looks like it's more leaning on sack him anyway. LV3 says let him stay. Daz saying let go. G says stay. Stephen says go. 2 mark shows.
Yeah.
Go says Daniel. Go says Sava. Shout out to you, Sava. Mate, give me a call, bro. We need to talk.
It's
Niall, 0.
Yeah.
Most people are saying zeros.
There are still a few there. So look, let's just put it in right. So there's just a few things, right? So defeated Chelsea on Thursday would see Ange become the first Tottenham boss to ever lose the first 4 league games against Chelsea. No side has earned fewer points in the Premier League London derbies this season than Tottenham, who have lost 5 of such games this campaign, winning 3 and drawing 1. We're only above West Ham. And should West Ham win and we lose to Chelsea, we'll be bottom of the London clubs. From November the 6th to Chelsea, we have suffered more league defeats, 27 than wins, 22. In total, since November the 5th, 2023, before the Chelsea game to now, we've lost 35 matches. Only 4 ever-present Premier League clubs have taken fewer points than us from then. And we will drop 2 more places should we lose to Chelsea and Everton and West Ham win this week. No shots on target in the opening 45 minutes at Fulham meant it was the 9th time we have failed to register a single shot on target in the first half of the game in the Premier League under Postecoglou. This is more than our last 2 permanent managers combined, Antonio Conte's 6 and Nuno 2. Our away form has been horrendous. Only relegation-threatened sides Leicester 10 and Southampton 12 have lost more Premier League games away from home this season than us, 8. We have lost a staggering 15 of our 29 games, taking us to over 50% mark. We have lost 19 games in total so far, with 11 games to go, giving him a 43 win percentage this season. We have a points per game average for the season so far of just 1.17. Now, take the stats away. I look for a manager who's come in a shit show. I will 100% give him that of where we were. Deadwood, all the rest of it, new signings. So I would like to look for something called progression over this period of 19 months. What I see is regression. I see an unwillingness to voluntarily play the youth players. I see a situation where he's been forced to play them, and he's getting credit for the likes of Jed Spence and some of these others. Now, for me, there are so many signs. His inability to change it up in games. And Ange Ball was a thing. Ange Ball is no longer a thing. When did you last see Ange Ball? Because what has happened is, like a tortoise that's been alarmed, he's gone back inside his shell. And this bravado guy who came in happy-go-lucky at the beginning of his managerial career at this club has fallen by the wayside now. And what we see is a guy tinkering with his system, being more pragmatic, and that flowing football that we saw so fantastically in those first 10 games when clubs and sides didn't understand how to play us until Gary O'Neill went on Monday Night Football and laid down the blueprint on how to beat Ange Postecoglou. He doesn't have an answer. He's playing in a league now where he's playing with elite managers who know how to change it up, who know how to counteract your changes in your system. He doesn't have the answer to it. We've heard the injuries, and it's granted the injuries have been an issue, but a lot of the injuries have been of his making with his system, demanding huge recovery runs from the likes of our centre-backs and our wing-backs. And it's precipitated that the whole injury crisis that has befalled us. The fact that he fell out with Scott, who's been with the company with us for 20 years, through the likes of Mourinho, Conte, Nuno, Poch, all vocal managers. Yes, we've had our depth, but this guy is out of his depth. And Scott has said, this is not sustainable, but it's who we are, mate. It works, it worked in Celtic, it worked in Japan, it worked in Australia. It ain't going to work here. You've fallen out with him. And the repercussions of that have been what we've seen this season with our injury crisis. Scott was right, Ange was wrong. And unfortunately, what we see now is the result of all of these things, all the stars and the lining up and giving us this shit show that we're in right now. I think if we win this Europa League, now after saying all that, you probably think the guy's nuts. He's now going to say, oh, they can win the Europa League. And I'll tell you why. Because I believe these players, whilst totally unmotivated for the Premier League right now, the chance of glory in a trophy like this with a big viewing audience, the chance to show their wares, I think they will naturally lift their game for these games again, try and track Frankfurt. And if we win it, it will be despite Ange Postecoglou, not because of him.
Okay. Look, very, very strong argument. I don't disagree with any of the things that you said, right? I'm also Ange. If we lose, if we're out against Frankfurt or against whoever we meet in the semi-finals, or even if we get to the final and we don't lose, we don't win, then I think it's time to sort of sunset the guy, right? I do. So I don't disagree with anything you say at all. I would just make the argument that for a number of reasons, I think that sacking a guy who leads you to the most success that any manager has done, and with a bunch of players who are incredibly young, that will, in so doing, in lifting the cup, become more successful as a Spurs player than all of the champion players that we've had over the last 40 years, give or take. They will be more successful than Harry Kane. They will be more, as a Tottenham player, more successful than Gareth Bale, more successful than Sol Campbell, than Ledley King, than Luka Modric, than Rafael van der Vaart. And they will be, right? In a Tottenham shirt, a Tottenham shirt, right? Which is what we care about. They will be more successful in their 18th year on this planet, 19th year on this planet, 20th year on this planet, 21st. There's very few people that are 31, 32, right? Most of them are kids. And a manager that is more successful than all of the managers that have gone before, more successful than Antonio Conte, who we paid £15 million a year for, who's won everything everywhere he goes, apart from Tottenham. One of the things that we are ridiculed for, both within our own Tottenham fan base and externally. Right, everyone, it's a graveyard shift. Everyone people that are serial winners come to Tottenham and they don't win. Jose Mourinho wins everywhere, didn't win at Tottenham. Antonio Conte wins everywhere, didn't win at Tottenham. Harry Redknapp was the birthplace of our revolution. He was the cornerstone of our genesis into Martin Jol, right? Martin Jol, all of them, wherever, right? All of them. None of them lifted the Europa League. Now, you can make an argument around whether it's more difficult to lift the Europa League Cup or otherwise than the Carabao Cup, depending on who you get.
Is it easier this year, Sean?
Hang on. You got to let me land on this one, right? And I've only got a few minutes. If you sack a guy that is more successful than any of the others, then first of all, what message does that send to the footballing universe? It says that Tottenham Hotspur fans are never happy. It says those of the fan base who weren't happy when we finished fourth every year and said top four's not a trophy, bro, then you're not happy when we lift the trophy anyway. And we know from recent history and looking around the Tottenham community, we know that there are fans that are so dedicated to their Levy out cause that they were championing the idea of relegation because it would strengthen their narrative. They were championing the idea of losing to Liverpool or beating Liverpool and lifting the cup would be negative for our cause. So like everywhere in life, there are people where misery loves company and it doesn't matter what you do. They want to find a reason to be miserable. But absent those people, can you imagine, first of all, the message it sends around meritocracy versus a popularity contest? It says it doesn't matter what you do. If you finish fourth, but you lose in the cups, like the previous 10 managers might have done, that's not good enough. If you lift a cup and you don't finish fourth because top four doesn't matter, top four isn't a trophy, that's not good enough. If you go along with that narrative, I don't know what will make you happy unless you lift the Premier League. And that, as I've said 1,000 times, requires you to outperform. Put your microphone down, Johnny. I've still got 3 or 4 minutes left here, bro. that still requires you to overcome the complexity of beating nation states, which is something which people forget because they like to look insularly and internally just at Tottenham Hotspur. And if you do look insularly and internally at Tottenham Hotspur, what you will see next season, if Ange Postecoglou is still here, is, as far as we can judge, none of us know the truth, but we have heard a never-ending stream of players come out and say, I support the guy, I support the manager, we're all behind him. A footballing philosophy that most of us got on board within the first 10 games when it worked and suddenly forgot and ignored and hated and resented when it didn't. But if you lift the Europa League, not only do you get into the Champions League and you're playing the best teams in the world again, maybe because, maybe undeserved or otherwise, you are there. You've lifted the Europa League, the most successful manager with the most successful players. And you know what else that brings, mate? That brings confidence. And what I would say is that a team that is losing confidence, regardless of whether their rhetoric when they are rolled out in front of the press and say, I'm right behind, I don't believe that all of that is sincere. I think a lot of them do actually have some question marks around the system because the results haven't materialized. But if you lift the Europa League as a player that is 19, 18, 20, 21, 22, what does that do? It materially changes your DNA. It permanently changes. It makes an indelible mark in your confidence to say, I was 19 years old, Lucas Bergvall. I came from Sweden and I immediately got my chance because Tottenham honored their promise to me, and I played, and I was the number one name on the team sheet for the final, and I did what I did, and by the way, I lifted the Europa fucking League. How many players can say that? Next season, you go into next summer with a team that is full of young players that are champions. You go into a manager that didn't just brag that he wins everything in his second year. He was right because he did do it at Tottenham when nobody else did. You also have the extra £100 million in transfer spend. You still only need 4 or 5 players in your squad, but now you have 200 million to drop on it, not just 100. Suddenly, Christian Romero might not want to go. Suddenly, you can just flitter in a little bit more. And you know what? Suddenly, the buy-in is there. Now, do I believe that Ange Postecoglou is the guy to do things next season? Probably not. But does he earn the right to have a crack? 1,000,000% he does. And if you're saying no, I don't know what the fuck will make you happy, because it wasn't enough when we finished top 4 and we didn't do anything in the trophies. But if you wanted the trophies and you got one, you got a big one. The biggest of them all, by the way, in terms of size, in terms of like occupying space in that empty cabinet. The Europa League does a better job of doing that than any of the other trophies. If you think that it's okay to sack a guy for success when it's the best success that you could have had, realistically, then you set a horrendous precedent. And what future manager is going to want to come to Tottenham when the fan base have got behind this notion that it doesn't fucking matter what you do, unless you win the Premier League, you ain't good enough for Tottenham. I don't know what planet we're on. If Ange Postecoglou wins the Europa League, he has earned the right to start as manager next season, in my opinion.
Mourinho, Man United.
He didn't. What did he do?
Well, he won the Europa League and he won the cup.
He started next season, right?
Well, got sacked pretty quick.
Well, that's fine. That's fine.
Matteo,
that's fine.
Right?
That's fine.
Won the Champions League.
I'm not saying that he gets it forevermore. I'm saying that he earns the right to start the next season.
Would you, with his talent ID that we've seen so far, would you be willing to give him 150 million to go and spend on some more of his so-called signings, the Brennan Johnsons of this world? I personally wouldn't. And I think he's going to cop block half of our youth. So no, for me, it wouldn't be. Listen, look, we both know Sean, right? And you can't mask. If you want to stick a sticking plaster over a gaping wound, that is fine. But in reality, it's only a short moment in time before the plaster comes off and the gaping wound opens up again, and we're left with a far bigger wound that's going to take far longer to heal.
What are we doing here? What can a manager possibly do that will satisfy a Spurs fan?
In the bigger picture, look, Sean, in isolation, it's a marvel, right? In isolation,
you have to reward that. Otherwise, what are we doing, mate? What are we doing in life? If the argument is top four is not a trophy and you're not going to win the Premier League, then what are we trying to do? What are we trying to do?
We all want to win a trophy, but you'll be burying your head in the sand if you honestly think, well, I haven't even gone to every single away game this season, right? Okay, but I've been to enough to feel totally demoralised now, right? I'm going to Chelsea on Thursday. I'm probably going to Wolves. I'm probably going to Eintracht Frankfurt. Well, not probably. I'm going to Eintracht Frankfurt away. Okay. And how many times am I going to be demoralised again, right? Maybe myself and all the guys that go to...
You're going to Frankfurt though, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, mate, I'm not talking about this. I'm on the same... We've got to round off because I've got to jump and so you as well, right? Yeah. But in a nutshell, guys, ones and zeros. If you are sticking to your previous assertion, despite Johnny's emblazoned pitch and my emblazoned pitch, then stick a 2 in. If you have changed your mind, then stick a 1. If you were a 0 and now you're a 1 because you agree with me and you listen to it. If you've heard me and you heard Johnny and you were a 1, but now you're a 0, having heard Johnny's pitch, then stick that. But if you're sticking to your previous assertion, stick in a 2. And then me and Johnny will know that these pitches are ridiculous and irrelevant debates anyway. But we got to go. Johnny, where you going? What's going on, mate?
It makes sense.
You love it. Stick the numbers in. So 2, we got 2s, 2, 2, 2. Everyone's staying where they are. That was a big fat waste of fucking time, wasn't it, Johnny?
No, listen, look, the pitch. Look, some people will listen to my pitch and say, I'm a joke. I've listened to it since February 2024 when I've been pitching that Ange Postecoglou, unfortunately, is not the man. And as we spoke, he's the guy before the guy, right? How many times have we said that?
Yeah, I've been saying that since before Ange was the guy, mate. Yeah, so,
yeah, the guy before the guy, right? But I don't believe that this squad is anywhere near as bad as Ange not got a clue as delivered for us.
All right, fair enough. Listen, we've got to round it off. I think everyone basically is saying that it doesn't matter what we said, that they're still on the same. They're still on the same. And by the way, Kieran, yes, mate, my argument is based on ifs. If we win the Europa League, if we don't, then sack him. 100%. I'm with you. I'm with everyone on the basis of the what Johnny. I don't disagree with Johnny at all. I'm just saying, if you win the Europa League, I don't know how you can justify sacking him, and what message does that send? I reckon we'll be ridiculed by the Tottenham community, or by the football community. The guy's lifted you the biggest trophy you've ever won in your lifetime, in most people's lifetime, and you're not happy. I don't know. Anyway, guys, Johnny, you gotta go. I gotta go.
Hang on, just to say, it will be proper Spursy. We sacked Jose Mourinho before the cup final. It's nothing new for Spurs. It'll be bang on par for how we carry on.
100%. Love you, Johnny. Thanks for coming on, mate. What's coming up on? So we've got football links. Go to the football link, guys, but also get down to Johnny83232 on Twitter, and Insta is, what is it, mate? Talking Tottenham 1882.
Talking Tottenham 1882. If you're on TikTok and Instagram, give us a follow there. I put on weirdest thing. I put my own videos on TikTok, and they tell me I'm copying other people's stuff. But you can put it on Instagram. I mean, it's all like madness. But give us a follow there. Thursday, I'll be doing like my usual before and after match day thing on Twitter. And Friday, we'll be on Last Word on Spurs with Christina and Billy T. And we'll be talking about the demo on the coming up against Southampton.
Good luck to everyone with the demonstration. I was there last time, but to get content, but I'm not someone that necessarily thinks it will make a difference, but I know it makes you guys feel better to have your say, and I support it. So good luck with all that stuff. Johnny, thanks so much, mate. I've got to jump serve you. We're going to leave it there, guys, and we will send over to, I'm not sure I can, Johnny, go over to Football Heritage TV right now. I can't do the redirect. I haven't got access, Sav, but go over to Football Heritage, and I'll see you on the next one. And love you all. Like, subscribe. As always.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.